What happened with The Summer I Turned Pretty on Prime Video goes way deeper than you think. This isn't just another story about teen romance or behind-the-scenes gossip. We're talking about Amazon Prime themselves issuing legal threats to fans, a streaming platform so concerned they had to publicly warn subscribers they'd be banned, and a fan base that became so toxic it forced the entire entertainment industry to have uncomfortable conversations about where the line really is. Belly and Conrad's love story might have made you cry, but what happened in real life made Jenny Han and the cast of The Summer I Turned Pretty question everything about fame, privacy, and whether creating art for obsessed audiences is even worth it anymore. The Summer I Turned Pretty Season 1 and Season 2 weren't just successful shows on Amazon Prime. They created a phenomenon so intense that Lola Tung can't go anywhere without security, cast interviews became minefields of tension you could cut with a knife, and the full episode behind-the-scenes content now feels completely different when you know what was really happening. This is celebrity news that exposes how modern fandom has crossed into genuinely dangerous territory. If you want to understand how a sweet summer romance based on Jenny Han's beloved books turned into a cautionary tale about parasocial relationships, toxic shipping culture, and why young actors are reconsidering their entire careers, buckle up because this story gets darker than Cousins Beach at midnight.
Quick thing before we dive in. If you're about to watch me dissect how a beach romance show accidentally created a digital war zone without hitting subscribe, that's like going to Cousins Beach and not even getting in the water. Subscribe, because I promise this rabbit hole gets wild and you'll want updates when the next season of fan chaos inevitably drops. The Summer I Turned Pretty didn't just premiere on Prime Video in June 2022, it detonated across every social media platform like a carefully orchestrated cultural explosion. Jenny Han's book trilogy had loyal fans, sure, but nobody predicted the show would become the kind of phenomenon that consumes people's entire online existence. Within days of the first episode dropping, the internet transformed into a battlefield. Team Conrad versus Team Jeremiah wasn't just a preference, it became an identity. People put it in their social media bios. They created elaborate video essays defending their choice with the passion of religious converts. Fan accounts dedicated to analyzing every micro-expression, every hand touch, every lingering glance between Belly and the Fisher brothers accumulated hundreds of thousands of followers practically overnight. The intensity made Twilight's Team Edward versus Team Jacob look like a casual disagreement at a book club.
Lola Tung became an overnight sensation in ways most actors spend decades trying to achieve. Christopher Briney and Gavin Casalegno went from relative unknowns to having millions of followers analyzing their every Instagram story for hidden meanings. The cast couldn't post a simple photo without thousands of comments dissecting what it meant for their characters' relationships. Every cast interview turned into evidence for elaborate theories about who Belly should really end up with and why the other choice would be a complete betrayal of everything the show represented. But here's where things started shifting from enthusiastic fandom into something way more concerning. Fans didn't just love the fictional relationships, they became convinced they had ownership over these stories and the people telling them. The line between Belly the character and Lola Tung the actress started dissolving in fans' minds. Same with Christopher and Conrad, Gavin and Jeremiah. These weren't actors playing roles anymore. They were living embodiments of fictional relationships that fans had built their entire emotional lives around. The Amazon Prime view numbers were astronomical. Season 1 broke streaming records. By the time The Summer I Turned Pretty Season 2 arrived, anticipation had reached fever pitch. Jenny Han had created something that transcended typical show success. This was a cultural moment. But that level of devotion comes with expectations that nobody involved was prepared to handle. The first major sign that something had gone seriously wrong came from an absolutely unprecedented move. Amazon Prime Video, a massive streaming platform that usually stays behind the scenes and lets content speak for itself, felt compelled to issue a public warning to the Summer I Turned Pretty fan base. They released a statement making it crystal clear they have zero tolerance for bullying, harassment, or threatening behavior directed at anyone connected to their productions.
Stop and think about how unusual that is. Major streaming platforms don't typically get involved in fan discussions or police how subscribers talk about shows online. They definitely don't threaten to ban paying customers over a teen romance series. But the situation had escalated to the point where Amazon's legal team apparently decided they needed to take a public stance before things got even worse. The statement specifically mentioned that fans engaging in harassment of cast members, crew, or fellow viewers would face consequences, including being banned from the platform entirely. They weren't playing around. This wasn't a gentle reminder to be nice. This was a corporation covering themselves legally because the behavior had crossed lines that made them genuinely concerned about potential real-world consequences. Industry insiders started sharing details about just how bad things had gotten behind closed doors. The entire cast had been receiving disturbing levels of harassment, but it wasn't coming from random internet trolls. It was coming from people who claimed to love the show. Fans were sending messages to the actors demanding they support specific ships, criticizing them for not aligning with fan expectations, and creating a hostile environment that made simple social media interaction feel like navigating a minefield. Multiple entertainment journalists reported that the toxicity had reached levels where it was affecting the actors' mental health and making promotional work genuinely stressful rather than fun. Cast members were reportedly working with security teams and social media managers to filter the constant barrage of intense messages. What should have been a dream job, promoting a successful show, had turned into an exhausting exercise in managing an audience that felt entitled to control every aspect of these young actors' lives and opinions. The shipping wars had evolved beyond fictional character preferences into something genuinely ugly. Fans of Team Conrad were attacking fans of Team Jeremiah and vice versa. But more disturbingly, they were attacking the actors themselves for not promoting their preferred relationship strongly enough, or for having opinions that didn't match fan expectations. The parasocial relationships had become so intense that fans genuinely believed they knew these actors personally and had the right to police their behavior. In November 2024, something happened that made everyone paying attention realize the cast dynamic was way more complicated than the happy family image they presented during press tours. Gavin Casalegno got married to Cheyenne King in what should have been a beautiful celebration, surrounded by the people he'd worked closely with for years. Instead, it became the most talked about wedding for what didn't happen rather than what did. Not one single cast member showed up. Zero. Lola Tung, who had filmed intimate romantic scenes with Gavin across multiple seasons and talked in early interviews about how close the cast had become, wasn't there. Christopher Brinny, his on-screen rival who'd spent countless hours filming emotionally charged scenes together, didn't attend. Sean Kaufman, who plays Steven and had worked alongside Gavin throughout the entire series, was absent. Even Jenny Han herself, the creator who had launched all their careers and served as a mentor figure, wasn't present at the wedding. Now, people miss weddings for legitimate reasons all the time. Scheduling conflicts happen, prior commitments can't be changed, family obligations take priority. But when literally everyone from your professional family is absent from one of the biggest personal moments of your life, it tells a story that's impossible to ignore. The internet immediately went into detective mode, analyzing what this absence meant. Fans started pulling up comparison photos from other young adult show casts and their weddings. The Outer Banks cast regularly shows up for each other's major life events, flooding social media with supportive posts and genuine excitement. Stranger Things actors consistently demonstrate real friendships that extend beyond their work obligations. Even reality show contestants typically rally around castmates' weddings with public congratulations and celebration. But the Summer I Turned Pretty cast? Complete radio silence. No Instagram stories congratulating the couple. No public acknowledgement whatsoever. Gavin posted photos from his beautiful wedding, and his comment section was full of fans noticing who wasn't there and what that absence meant. The lack of even basic professional courtesy in the form of a public congratulations post spoke volumes about whatever was happening behind the carefully managed public image. Entertainment reporters started reaching out to representatives for comment, but everyone involved stayed quiet. No explanations, no clarifications, just an awkward silence that made the situation feel even more loaded with unspoken tension. For a cast that had spent years doing joint interviews talking about how filming brought them together like family, the complete absence at such a significant personal milestone felt like a glaring contradiction that couldn't be explained away. Once people started paying closer attention to the cast dynamic, promotional content that had seemed normal before suddenly felt uncomfortable in retrospect. The Summer I Turned Pretty cast interviews that used to be praised for natural chemistry and genuine affection started showing cracks that eagle-eyed viewers couldn't unsee. Body language experts on social media began breaking down the subtle signs of tension during promotional appearances for the later seasons. In early Season 1 interviews, the three leads had easy rapport. They finished each other's sentences, referenced inside jokes, and showed the kind of natural comfort that comes from genuine friendship. But by Season 2, and especially Season 3 promotional cycles, something had shifted. During interviews, you could notice groupings forming. Some cast members would engage in side conversations that seemed to deliberately exclude others. The spontaneous laughter and authentic interactions that characterized early press had been replaced by polite professionalism that felt rehearsed and careful. When interviewers asked about their friendships offset or funny behind-the-scenes moments, the responses became noticeably vague and generic compared to the specific, enthusiastic stories they used to share. Entertainment journalists who'd interviewed the cast multiple times across different seasons started commenting privately about the changed energy. Professional actors are typically skilled at maintaining appearances during promotional obligations, regardless of personal relationships. The fact that the tension was visible despite their best efforts suggested something significant had fractured behind the scenes. Fans created comparison videos showing the evolution of cast interactions over time. The difference was stark. Early promotional content felt loose and fun, with cast members genuinely enjoying each other's company and creating entertaining content together. Later promotional appearances felt like obligation, with everyone being professionally courteous but lacking the warmth and genuine connection that made audiences fall in love with their chemistry in the first place. The contrast became a topic of discussion across fan communities. People who loved the show were confused and concerned about why the actors, who brought such beautiful chemistry to their on-screen relationships, seemed increasingly uncomfortable in each other's presence during real-life interactions. The magic that made The Summer I Turned Pretty special was partially built on believing these actors genuinely cared about each other and the story they were telling together. Watching that foundation crack in real time was disorienting for devoted fans. Hey, if you're still here without subscribing, I respect your commitment to consuming free content with absolutely zero obligation. But maybe throw me a subscribe since I'm out here connecting dots about TV drama like I'm investigating a genuine conspiracy. Plus, celebrity news keeps getting weirder, and someone needs to document this cultural moment for future anthropologists. The most damning evidence that something fundamental had broken within the Summer I Turned Pretty cast came from what wasn't happening on social media anymore. Fans who meticulously followed all the cast members' accounts started noticing a pattern of complete digital distance that contradicted everything they'd claimed about their close relationships. In the early days after Season 1's success, the cast's social media was full of friendly interactions. They'd comment on each other's posts with inside jokes and supportive messages. They'd share behind-the-scenes content, showing them hanging out between takes or grabbing meals together. Birthday posts were heartfelt and personal. Professional achievements were celebrated publicly by the whole group. The social media presence matched the narrative they presented in interviews about becoming like family through the intense experience of filming together. But gradually, all of that disappeared. The friendly comments stopped. The shared content vanished. Birthday acknowledgments became non-existent. Professional milestones went uncelebrated by castmates. Their social media presence became completely compartmentalized, as if they existed in separate universes rather than working together on the same massively successful project. Dedicated fans started creating detailed timelines of when the interaction stopped and comparing the Summer I Turned Pretty cast's social media behavior to other popular teen drama casts. The contrast was striking. Shows like Outer Banks, Stranger Things, and even older series like The Vampire Diaries maintained cast friendships and consistent social media engagement that suggested genuine, ongoing relationships extending well beyond their show's production schedules. Meanwhile, the Summer I Turned Pretty cast seemed to be actively avoiding any public association beyond contractually obligated promotional content. Some fans noticed potential unfollowing patterns, though accounts would sometimes be refollowed after fans pointed it out publicly. The digital distance was deliberate and impossible to miss once you started paying attention.
This level of public disconnection is genuinely unusual for a cast that just months earlier had been enthusiastically promoting their show as one big happy family. The shift was dramatic enough that it couldn't be explained away as natural drift or busy schedules. These were young actors at similar career stages, living in the same industry circles, working on the same project that had launched all their careers. The complete absence of even basic professional courtesy in the form of social media interaction suggested something had fractured in ways that made even minimal public connection feel impossible or unwanted. For fans who had invested emotionally, not just in the fictional relationships, but in the real-life cast dynamics and friendships, watching those bonds disintegrate publicly across social media felt like a secondary betrayal. The show had sold itself partially on the chemistry and genuine affection between the leads. Discovering that chemistry was either never real or had completely deteriorated made rewatching earlier content feel complicated and strange.
When The Summer I Turned Pretty Season 3 premiered in summer 2025, it arrived amid all this swirling speculation and fan division about what was really happening with the cast. Viewers immediately began scrutinizing every scene with new awareness, looking for signs that off-screen tension might be affecting on-screen performances and chemistry. Some fans claimed they could detect differences in energy between romantic scenes, though whether this was genuine observation or confirmation bias is impossible to determine. The challenge with analyzing performances through the lens of behind-the-scenes drama is that knowing about real-life complications inevitably colors how you interpret what you're seeing on screen. Scenes that might have felt perfectly natural without context suddenly seem loaded with unintended meaning when you're actively looking for problems. Entertainment critics and industry analysts started discussing how this unprecedented level of public cast drama could affect not just the show's immediate reception, but its lasting legacy. While controversy sometimes generates publicity that boosts viewership through curiosity, the deeply personal nature of this situation created a more complex dynamic. The show's success had been built partially on audiences believing in the authentic connection between these actors and their investment in the story. Discovering that connection might have been manufactured or had dissolved completely complicated the viewing experience in ways that typical Hollywood drama doesn't. The actual streaming numbers for the final season remain strong, suggesting most casual viewers either weren't aware of the behind-the-scenes tension or didn't care enough about it to stop watching a show they'd invested in emotionally. But the passionate core fan base that had made The Summer I Turned Pretty such a cultural phenomenon became increasingly divided and vocal. Different factions defended different cast members, engaged in ongoing debates about who was responsible for the fractured dynamic, and created an exhausting environment where simply enjoying the show felt impossible without taking sides.
Amazon Prime Video's decision to publicly warn fans about their behavior highlighted how modern celebrity culture has created unrealistic expectations and parasocial relationships that genuinely harm everyone involved.
The fact that a major streaming platform felt compelled to threaten account bans over discussions about a romantic drama demonstrates how quickly fan communities can spiral into toxic territory when they feel entitled to control every aspect of actors' lives and relationships. The entire situation raised broader questions that extend beyond just one television show. How much should audiences reasonably know or care about actors' personal lives and relationships? Where's the line between natural curiosity about public figures and invasive obsession that crosses into harassment? When does passionate fandom become genuinely harmful to the real people involved? And how can young actors navigate sudden fame and intense scrutiny from audiences who feel personal ownership over their careers and private decisions? The Summer I Turned Pretty cast drama represents something much larger than just one show or one group of young actors struggling with sudden fame. It's a symptom of how fundamentally social media and streaming culture have changed the relationship between audiences and entertainers in ways that may not be sustainable or healthy for anyone involved. Previous generations of actors had more separation between their professional and personal lives. They did press tours and promotional appearances, sure, but they weren't expected to provide constant access to their daily existence through Instagram stories and TikTok videos. Fans might have been devoted, but they didn't have the tools to conduct forensic investigations of every social interaction, analyze who was liking whose posts, and track who attended whose personal events.
Now, young actors are thrust into the spotlight and immediately expected to maintain perfectly curated public personas while also being authentic and relatable. They're supposed to share enough of their real lives to satisfy audience curiosity, but not so much that they lose all privacy. They should have opinions and values that align with their progressive young fan base, but never say anything controversial that might alienate any segment of viewers. They need to maintain visible friendships with castmates to prove the behind-the-scenes family narrative is real, but those relationships are constantly scrutinized for any sign of fakeness or tension. These expectations are genuinely impossible to meet consistently, especially for actors in their early 20s who are still figuring out who they are as people, while millions of strangers watch and judge their every move. The pressure would be overwhelming for anyone, but it's particularly intense for actors on shows with devoted young fan bases that have built entire emotional identities around fictional relationships and the people portraying them.
The Summer I Turned Pretty became a cautionary tale about how quickly beloved entertainment can become complicated when audiences feel entitled to control every aspect of the people creating it. Fans who loved the show so much they made it central to their online identity couldn't accept that the real people involved might have complicated relationships or personal differences that didn't match the perfect image they'd constructed in their minds. The toxicity that emerged from the fanbase ultimately damaged the very thing they claimed to love. The harassment, the constant speculation, the invasive questions, the demands that actors explain and justify their personal relationships and private decisions created an environment where genuine authenticity became impossible. Everyone involved had to carefully manage their public presence because saying or doing the wrong thing could trigger waves of criticism and abuse from people who claim to be supportive fans. Looking at the complete art from the show's premiere to its conclusion, The Summer I Turned Pretty demonstrates how modern fandom culture has evolved into something that can be genuinely destructive. The intense devotion that made the show successful also created unrealistic expectations and parasocial relationships that made everyone involved miserable. The constant surveillance and judgment transformed what should have been a joyful celebration of a successful show into an exhausting exercise in managing impossible audience demands.
The lasting impact of the Summer I Turned Pretty controversy extends far beyond just one television series or its cast members. It forced the entire entertainment industry to have uncomfortable but necessary conversations about what we're doing to young performers and whether current fan culture is sustainable.
Several industry organizations have started developing better support systems for actors dealing with intense online harassment and the mental health impacts of sudden fame. Streaming platforms are reconsidering how much personal access they require from talent during promotional campaigns. Talent agencies are providing media training that specifically addresses navigating toxic fan interactions and maintaining boundaries in an era of expected constant accessibility. But ultimately, the biggest question remains unanswered. Can we create entertainment that inspires passionate devotion without that devotion becoming toxic and destructive? Is there a way to love a show and its characters without feeling entitled to control the real people portraying them? Where's the line between legitimate interest in public figures and invasive surveillance that crosses into harassment? The Summer I Turned Pretty proved that line is incredibly blurry and easily crossed, especially when audiences are young, extremely online, and have built significant portions of their identity around fictional relationships. The show that was supposed to capture innocent summer romance and first love instead revealed uncomfortable truths about how we consume entertainment and treat the real people creating it. For the cast members themselves, this experience will undoubtedly shape how they approach their careers moving forward. They learned harsh lessons about fame, privacy, and the disconnect between the fantasy audiences create and the reality of being a real person trying to do a job while millions of strangers watch and judge. Whether this makes them more cautious, more private, or potentially less interested in taking roles that invite this level of intense scrutiny remains to be seen. Jenny Han created a beautiful story about growing up, first love, and choosing your own path. But the adaptation's legacy became complicated by factors completely outside her control. The show succeeded beyond anyone's expectations, but that success came with costs nobody anticipated when they first started filming at Cousins Beach.
The complete story of what happened with The Summer I Turned Pretty isn't really about shipping wars or caste drama. It's about what happens when entertainment becomes so central to people's identities that they forget the real humans involved. It's about parasocial relationships taken to extremes. It's about how social media has blurred every boundary between public and private until nothing feels sacred anymore. The cast members who'd brought Belly, Conrad, and Jeremiah to life gave audiences something beautiful that resonated deeply with millions of viewers. They created a show that captured summer romance and coming of age in ways that felt authentic and emotionally true. But the response to that success revealed ugly realities about modern fan culture that nobody involved was prepared to handle. As we move forward into whatever comes next for these young actors and the shows that follow, maybe we all need to remember something basic. These are real people doing a job. They deserve privacy, respect, and the freedom to have complicated personal relationships without constant surveillance and judgment from strangers. Loving a show doesn't mean owning the people who created it.
The Summer I Turned Pretty gave us a compelling story about choosing between two brothers and finding yourself in the process. Maybe the real lesson is that sometimes the best way to love something is to let it exist without trying to control every aspect of it. That applies to fictional characters, and it definitely applies to real people just trying to navigate their careers and lives. And there you have it, the complete, complicated story of how a perfect summer romance show became a case study in toxic fandom and impossible expectations. If you made it this far without subscribing, I'm genuinely impressed by your commitment to lurking. Hit that subscribe button because apparently I built my entire channel around explaining why entertainment drama is way more complicated than it looks, and your validation would really help justify this career path to my concerned parents. The Summer I Turned Pretty might be over, but these conversations about fan culture and celebrity privacy are just beginning, and I'll be here breaking it all down one uncomfortable situation at a time.